Thank you, gentlemen, for taking time out of your busy schedules. In Davos, everyone is talking about Trump and AI, but today we are only going to talk about AI. We have a great panel today. We have people who are coming from different perspectives, who have worked in different industries. We have Mr. Sylvain Duranton, MD and Senior Partner, Global Leader, BCG X. We have Mr. Umesh Sachdev, Co-founder and CEO, Uniphore. And we have Mr. Lakshmanan Chidambaram, President and Head, Americas Leadership Council, Tech Mahindra. It's going to be a great conversation, and let's just jump right in. Where are we currently in the hype cycle with regards to AI? We've been talking about AI for a year and a half now, when everyone's seen, and we've seen multiple technologies being spoken about for a year or two, blockchain, other things, and now it's AI. If you can start with you, Umesh.
This is a great place to start, Vinod. Look, as you said, here at Davos, AI is the topic du jour. And by the way, it was last year as well. And I think it's the classic. Every time a new transition of this sort of occurs, whether it was the internet or cloud or now AI, I feel like most constituents, most business leaders, government leaders, overhype what this transition could do in the very near term. And that leads to heightened expectations, possibly disappointments, which then leads to what's called the valley of disillusionment, which in itself is not a bad thing, because that's where realism sets in and practical reality sets in. But I think the mistake we must all avoid is, post the valley of disillusionment, we should also not underestimate the impact this trend would have in the medium term. So where are we in this cycle? At Uniphore, we serve close to 2,000 enterprise customers, large banks, telecom companies, retail companies. We are beginning to see large-scale adoption of agentic AI, especially in our clients in the US and beginning in the Europe. Asia is right behind, this time the gap is narrow between US and Asia. But here's the difference. I think people ask me, which industry are you seeing the trend more or less? This time, it's less about the differentiation in industry. We see use cases across every industry. It's the quality of leadership of a company that's right now making the difference. I see most of my big new projects are happening when the CEO is sponsoring the initiative. They have a clear goal of either increasing revenue or efficiency or EBITDA, and that's leading to major initiatives of agentic AI. We have customers in banking who are using agentic AI for compliance. We have telecom companies who are dramatically reducing headcount in call centers. We have retail companies who are moving agentic AI into marketing and content creation and campaign generation. And finally, we have airlines, which are beginning to use this in revenue cycle management. So across the board, we are seeing use cases. But at the same time, the reason it hasn't proliferated right now is the distinguishing factor between companies who are using it versus not is the quality of leadership.
Sure. Across industries, across functions, where do you see AI in this hype cycle?
So I feel 24 was a super good year for AI, because at the end of last year, we just had a few proof of concept, some gadgets. People were looking at the technology thinking, my God. We were talking a lot about hallucination, for instance. The ecosystem was pretty much US-centric. 1 year into this, we see that companies have started to scale some things, and in our latest survey, we surveyed 1,800 leaders from across the world, across sectors. 25% say we are making a real return on our investment into AI, and that's good, 25%, because the technology is super new, as you were saying, so it's a very good start that we are seeing there. The ecosystem now is not so much US-centric. We see LLMs and solutions from all over the world which are being deployed. So I feel good about where we are in terms of AI, and I agree with you that agentic AI will be the thing that will make a difference. It has started to make a difference in here, and we see real at-scale application of agentic AI across sectors. And that will continue to fuel innovation. And so my bet is that for next year, moving from maybe 25% of companies who say we are making real money with AI to maybe 50% would be an awesome achievement already.
Mr. Chidambaram, you work with Fortune 500 companies. Where do you see AI adoption in that? And since you are one of the leading service providers across industries, how aware are companies? How open are they? And What's the state of adoption?
So Umesh and Sylvain made very, very relevant comments on this. As we started the beginning of last year, no one could stop and end a sentence without AI, right? There's so much of hype around it. Like Gartner named AI at the height of its inflated expectation cycle. We've seen many come and go, right? Metaverse. So much of talk, nothing happened. Yes, yeah. So as we were looking at this, lots of people became a board subject. So the first panic for a CIO was get something done. So they went and identified a number of use cases which was at the periphery of the enterprise, right? And that was a mistake because there's no commitment, show some results, type of a thing. Whereas now the whole thing is maturing. There are two things that are happening as we see it. One is organizations are still struggling through a phase where is my data ready? What will I do about ethics and compliance? How much money is it costing me? I never thought it's going to cost me this much money to get this whole thing, off the ground, right? So they are going, and then the final thing is the collaboration between human and AI, right? The humans have been resisting. So the senior management wants it, the middle management is pushing back, right? So many organizations are now going through this difficult phase, yes. And those that persist with this, don't get lost, and keep their North Star and vision very clear are the ones who are there's going to be a big gap between those organizations and those that are still lost in the periphery. I'm seeing a number of strong use cases. And when I say strong, what I mean is it should move the needle. It should increase revenue by 3%. It should reduce cost by 8%. Don't do small things. That's what we are telling our customers. Don't do small things, do big things and stay focused, and don't look back, right? And so those would be my comments.
So I was talking to Rich Lesser and he said 20% of BCG's revenue has somehow related to AI. That's a lot. Yeah, that's a lot. And all of you, all three of you gentlemen, if you see, you approach the corporate customers in a slightly different way, from a startup point of view, from a service provider, or from a consulting point of view. What are the type of mandates that you are getting early on? And are clients looking at functional part or total transformation of a business? We can start with you.
So goes back to my point of quality of leadership. Our biggest projects are originating from the CEO's desk. And when that happens, the framework we ask them to think about is, AI is powerful, agentic AI is powerful. Do you want AI to get you to do same with less? Or do you want it to do more for same? So the framework is, are you really looking to extract cost and efficiency and therefore free cash flow? Or are you looking to grow your business with similar cost as you had before? And the mandates coming from CEOs really determines the direction this takes. Mm-hmm. We are also beginning to see, and that's a theme emerging even at Davos this year, is a lot of people are stuck at POCs and pilots. And people are talking about what are those case studies? Why aren't we hearing about it all across? And I think if you think about a trend spotting situation, and we come back next year and validate this, watch for companies who are today saying we have 200, 300, 400 use cases with AI, versus companies which are saying I have 5, 6, 7, but I'm going to be very focused and deliver real value this year. So the companies that are going for headlines and big metrics that I have 400 use cases, chances are this time next year they'll be stuck in POCs. Because this is the year where leaders have to dedicate themselves and their companies to say, we have a handful of initiatives, we have clear either revenue goals or cost goals, whatever be the goals, and we're going to move from POC to pilot to production company-wide. And we are beginning to see, to the point that Lakshmanan was making, the gap between the haves and the have-nots. Mm-hmm. Companies that are beginning to see this, their earnings are beginning to look very different on a quarter-on-quarter basis, because AI is delivering on those goals. Others who are playing around with it, still in the POC mode, I think Wall Street is beginning to punish them. And we are beginning to see a gap between AI premiums being paid versus not.
So Sylvain, when people reach out to BCG X, what are the questions they're asking?
I think the main question is, how can I make money with AI? Many companies have started to invest a lot of money, have started to migrate data into the cloud, have started to build teams, purchase solutions and all of that. But the main challenge is money. And that's where we get most questions on how to scale these things, and I completely agree with what you are saying. I think a lot starts with the CEO, and of course the CEO needs to be super cognizant of what it will take. Many companies see this as yet another rollout of a new software, which it is not. It's not about user training. It's about reimagining how people will use the technology in the company. So there's a massive training, re-engineering part of those projects, which sometimes is overlooked, and people just deploy technology for the sake of deploying technology. You need focus. I completely agree, and very often you hear companies talking about use cases. I think use case is a bit small by definition. We're much more into taking maybe one function or sub-function and really completely reshape this function or sub-function around AI. Or take one product. In medtech, you've seen that a lot. You take a product and you inject AI into that, into what customers are selling, and you move from hardware into hardware powered by AI. So in medtech, you can do things where you have AI helping on the procedures, you have AI also helping on all the documentation and everything which is being done. So that's making a huge difference. Big focus, end-to-end work, and it's also a matter of investing. And you're saying we have very different situations. In our survey, we see that if you take companies which are 5 billion plus, 50%, they will put less than 25 million in AI next year. 1 out of 6, they will put over 100 million. So you can see that there are very different assessments of what needs to be done. At some point, companies need to put money after these things. And sometimes we've had a bit of an illusion that you just plug an API and all of a sudden, your processes are better, your people are more productive and everything. That's not the case. There's a very, very, very big part which is related to people.
So, Mr. Chidambaram, if you see the companies that you work with, since you are a service provider, IT service provider, they must be asking you for use cases, and also what solutions can you offer them? Are companies looking at only the periphery, or the central business model too?
So,
the core business model.
See, 30% of our customers in the Americas have been with us for 10 years or more.
Yes.
Right? I would like to describe it like we are 3 spoons of sugar in a glass of milk. Right? So we understand their legacy very well. We understand the business domain very well. And so I think we are equally responsible as they are in identifying what core issues need to be solved. So the role that we are playing is to make sure that our customers don't get distracted with the periphery. We are saying no. And we're going back into the CIO's office, into the CXO office, and telling them that this is not the right way to go, because we've learned lessons, right? We've made mistakes in the past. So that's one. And the second is, once that framework is ready, the customers are equally keen now to solve big problems. And sometimes they come up with the problem that's there in their mind. Many times we go back to the table, and give them big problems that can be solved. And I'll give you one quick example. One of the largest railroads in the US, we're seeing adoption across sectors, right? AI is getting embedded into workflows, enterprise workflows, period. Doesn't matter which. Some will adopt faster, than others, but we are seeing adoption across the board right now. And in this railroad, the example was that, it's highly unionized, right? And when workers, put claims in, it has to be settled within a particular period of time, let's say 30 days, and if they don't, there's huge penalties. And they were not able to, they had an army of people, they were not able to do it, they were just paying out the claims, right? And so now we brought a cognitive model inside, where AI studies the whole thing and, does everything that's required to, sort out these claims, and we are now saying that this could have a $500 million impact.
Wow.
Right? And so we have to work on cases like that.
So one of the things that is a big question in AI is basically the war going on between China, US. India also wants to position itself as a strong AI player. We have this AI mission which will work with the industry and lay out a roadmap. What should the AI mission look at in terms of putting an ecosystem which can make India a prime player in the AI game?
Well, if you think about the assets available, because I always think about a framework of where will you reinvent the wheel versus where can you create differentiation and intellectual property. So the assets available with India as a sovereign is a vast amount of population and therefore use cases that are very unique to India. Yeah. If you think about use cases in agriculture, the problem that Indian farmers face and that AI can solve are very different from a problem that American farmers face. Similarly, healthcare in rural India is going to be very different from healthcare in California. And so the opportunity at a fundamental level is to think about those end use cases which have a citizen scale impact for India. Now, whether that translates into creating India's own foundational models with the data available, or whether that means partnering with a friendly country who has foundational model, whether it's public sector or private sector, and then fine-tuning them and creating applications and agents, that's a direction that the India AI mission will ultimately decide. But I think the opportunity for India is very unique to first solve problems for itself, and then potentially become an exporter of this AI to similarly developing economies and countries where linguistics, language, base of the pyramid, the economic conditions that look alike from India, there is an opportunity for India to be the leader in those economies and the global south, as Prime Minister Modi talks about.
Can India be a powerhouse in AI going forward?
I think for sure. There are many assets, as you were saying, because of the challenge that needs to be solved, but also for what the country has built. You have an incredible culture, very strong engineers. When we do sentiment surveys across countries and regions for where the population stands vis-a-vis AI, India is one of the most positive on AI that we have in the world, because people see that as an opportunity, not as a threat, and that's major. Of course, there's the question of sovereignty and models, but I think super important is the infrastructure that is being put in place. And I'm a big believer in digital public infrastructure, which will enable the whole development of an ecosystem. And in that field, India has done a lot. You have an ID system, you have a payment system, which are digital, which have, which are live, and that's big things that are major unlock to be able to develop AI. So infrastructure matters a lot. I think on digital infrastructure, you've done a lot. You need to continue to do a lot. But I'm super positive about where AI, or let's say where India will bring AI.
Mr. Jam, do you think that the leading Indian IT companies will provide that push, that extra edge that India needs to make a name in the AI space?
See, I serve on the board of the US IBC. It's called the US India Business Council, a part of the US Chamber of Commerce, and privy to a lot of cooperation that's happening between the US and India. Primarily, with the leadership position China is beginning to take, and there's a lot of cooperation, right? Through ISED, the US government wants to share technology advancements. They don't want to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
Right, and our population, 650 million people, within the 27 to 32, 33 age bracket, that's a big advantage, right? But the problem there is skilling, right? That if you have to realize the Viksit Bharat dream, the IT industry has to produce another 1.4 million people who are employable in the technology industry. Out of the 1.5 million graduates, 10% have the right skills. So we have a huge skilling challenge ahead of us. Not that it cannot be done. Whenever India's put its mind on something, it's always gotten it done. So I think the service providers will play a huge role. We employ thousands of graduates every year out of school, right? So we have the engine to do it. But in addition to that, how do you shift some of this, from other industries, which, into the IT industry, reskilling, and then our universities? How do we build it into curriculum? Like, for example, Mahindra University is there in Hyderabad, right? Airbus has now done a partnership with Mahindra University to start training people, one, on technology, but also on the aerospace domain, right? So how do we do more of this, from the curriculum onwards? Those are all the challenges ahead of us and the opportunity as well.
So will AI be dominated by the big players, Microsoft, Meta, and these players, or do you think there is space for Indian startups to make a name in itself, or is this a moment like the Y2K moment which led to an Indian IT industries? Could we do something like that?
I think you're bang on. The big stack players will be there, right? Dell and Microsoft, so they have their work to do. But if you really look at who understands the customer problem, everything starts with the customer problem. People say, oh, this is an AI model. What will the AI model solve? Who knows the problem? if you're talking the Indian large service providers who are integrated within the customer's enterprise, we are the first ones to identify the problem. So developing those use cases, solving those problems, I think we have a huge role to play, right? And like you said, this could be like the Y2K kind of a moment where, this will lead to the next level of growth and also establish India-based companies which are providing global services as thought leaders as compared to just doing work at an operational level.
So, Sylvain?
I think on this notion of is there a moment coming? I
Yes.
think there's a moment like, for tech service providers and in the tech, but it's also a moment for the whole economy.
Yeah.
Because if large corporations are successful in deploying AI based on the local ecosystem, then they are becoming much more profitable. They can grow much faster. They unlock a lot of economic potential that then fuels the whole local ecosystem. So I really think there are two battles. There's the battle of the tech players, but the battle for the rest of the economy is super important because that's what will make a difference for the country.
Umesh?
So I think about your question, as two separate questions. First is the question of, is it really a big player dominating game or will newer player emerge? I think history has taught us over and over, each time a new technology transition occurs. I remember in the late 90s, I was still studying at the time when internet was just about coming out. It was all about, at that time, Cisco and Oracle and IBM were going to dominate internet, and there was no room for startups. But after that infrastructure, networking, everything was laid down in the world, the real value creation happened at the application layer. And that's when we saw emergence of Facebook, which is Meta now, Google, Salesforce. All the large cap companies today did not exist prior to the internet. Similarly, we are almost in that infrastructure build-out phase. These LLMs, these foundational models, these chips are all part of the foundational infrastructure that will fuel the AI economy. But make no mistake, right behind this is a slate of new application or agentic companies which will create value in different parts of the economy. Some will focus on B2B, some will focus on B2C, and those will be geographically spread. So we should keep our eyes open for the next Meta, the next Google, the next Salesforce emerging in AI. Now, as far as India is concerned, I think this is a moment to be thoughtful. We must not chase trends that, if some country is buying a lot of GPUs and doing their own foundational models, so should India. If it makes sense for India, by all means, the country should invest in it. But I think it's really important to carve out what will be the special position that India has in this game. The one thing that we haven't spoken about right now is another huge asset that India has that global companies are benefiting from, which is the talent pool. And this talent pool is getting trained on AI at a very fast velocity. We at Uniphore do a lot of our cutting edge product development, partly in California, but partly also in India. We inaugurated our AI Center of Excellence in Chennai last year. We have centers in Bangalore, and our Indian engineers are producing cutting edge agentic AI workflows that we are deploying around the world. So the talent pool is absolutely available in India, but this is a moment to be thoughtful on where will that intellectual property for India be, as opposed to let's just create a lower cost version of something else that another country has done.
So you spoke about mistakes people are making while adopting AI. What are the common mistakes and how can companies avoid them?
So the first is, at the top of the list, I would put human AI collaboration, right? And it's a culture change, right? Employees are threatened. There's a lot of talk that jobs will be lost because of AI. So I think that part has to be overcome, number one. Number two is the capital required, right, to invest in this. So if you make short-term decisions without thinking of the long-term, and if you're doing, and if you're solving big problems, then the capital investment is higher. And sometimes, corporations are not ready for it. In that case, it's better to take small but relevant projects, prove it, so that confidence within the ecosystem grows, right? And then it leads to mid-size, it leads to large-size projects. So in my mind, I think change management, governance, the whole budgeting exercise around it, all these are what people are grappling with now.
Still, when companies approach BCG and talk about having an AI strategy, what are the mistakes that they do?
I think the main mistake is spreading too thin the investment on many topics.
Okay. Yeah.
Not investing enough forcefully to really change companies. I don't believe any large company in one go can become a sort of data AI native first company everywhere, for sure. It's too much. I think in some very specific sub-functions or function, you can make that happen. And I'm really in the camp of, rather than spreading thin AI on everything, you take one or two areas where you make a massive difference through rebuilding the full thing around AI. I also think that companies are sometimes too cautious, especially in Europe, because to your point, everyone is anxious about what's going to happen with my job. And you said it, like middle managers are pushing back a lot on what things will happen. In the end, most companies are betting on the sort of human amplification. And in our latest survey, I was surprised with the number. It's only 7% of company leaders who say, I expect some job reduction in my company due to AI. And you even have some who said it's going to increase, and the two, they net out. And for most companies, to your point, is much more, let's do more with the teams I have, with the assets I have, than really massively cut. And we've heard a lot in the press, and there were economic surveys and studies saying that there will be a tsunami of layoffs and job restructuring. This is not what I'm seeing from my vantage point. And I think this thing of everyone's going to lose their job has been very detrimental to the deployment of AI. And you know, I've done lots of consulting before I was leading BCG X, so I've seen many consulting projects where you reduce costs, you boost productivity. These were not the most joy-enhancing projects of my life. What I see we do now with Gen AI, I see a super big joy factor, because in the end, people feel, okay, some of the most painful part of my job are automated. I stop wasting time. I'm focusing on better things. I also learn skills. And I feel I'm developing my professional skills because I'm using now Gen AI at work. And we see a big positive impact on morale when this is really deployed for real, at scale, in certain functions. So I'm super, super positive on that.
Umesh?
The mistakes made, if I think about what are the biggest impediments for any of my clients to adopt AI at enterprise-wide scale, those are two primarily. And the first one, which is by far the leader, is, prior to AI, there was this big focus. There was a lot of data companies coming around. There was a lot of focus on getting data ready, put it in catalogs. When Gen AI came to fore, it was almost like for a period of time, these companies forgot about data. And only now, as their POCs are yielding result and they want to scale it, they realize, oh no, our data is not prepared. Our data is not kept in the right place, in the right way for these models to come up the right way. I met a CIO of a very large insurer a few weeks ago. And after a very long presentation, he interrupted me and he said, Umesh, is it your understanding that our data would be kept in one place and therefore your AI models and agents will learn from it? And I said, look, we are agnostic to your data infrastructure. We don't care about which software you use, but yeah, we assume you have your data in one place. And he said, then we should meet in 3 years. Because first I'll have to do a big data migration project, bring everything here. And he said, I'll tell you why. We as an insurance company are a product of many acquisitions. And each time we've acquired an asset, we forgot to even out or smoothen out the data layer. Now today, new solutions exist. Uniphore has come out with a zero data AI cloud approach, where we allow them to say, you don't have to do a big migration project. We have the ability to work with hundreds of sources and create a virtual data framework here, and let's get you AI ready. So getting readiness with data is the number one impediment. And then number two comes the organizational challenge. A lot of the CEOs realize that they will have friction within their own company. For job security or insecurities, there are many parts of the company that will push back on these good initiatives.
I mean, it's a balance CEOs have to do, automation versus job creation.
I think what we are saying here, all of us are agreeing that across the board, we are seeing CEOs saying, it's not like I want to do same with less. I want to keep my workforce, but I want 3 times more productivity is what we are hearing, right? So this is less about job losses. This is a dramatic efficiency gain, unlike we've seen anything in the past. And for that to occur, for the CEO to be successful in their mission, our advice is create a tiger team right now. A small but empowered team that reports to the CEO, that's able to cut across the company, roll these initiatives out, explain to people the benefits, and bring everyone along. So organization design, getting prepared for AI, is an equal part of that. And I heard yesterday somebody make a comment about a 10-20-70 rule. 10% is technology, 20% is systems, 70% is people. And we don't talk about the 70%. All of this goes into making an AI project successful.
Sure. So one of the things that I think companies are not paying enough attention is they can get the data part right, they can get the technology part right. The governance model, that will require a major overhaul. What are you seeing when you go into a company, when you talk to the management, when you look at the technology? We can start with you, Mr. Chidambaram.
See, if you put the problem at the center, right? I have a factory. I want to spend 30% lesser than what I'm spending now. There are inefficiencies, and how can we leverage AI? The moment it is there, governance falls in place. There are people who are responsible for this. They are identified very, very quickly, and so the job gets done, right? So I've not seen a governance problem when the business problem is very clear and the C-level buy-in is very clear. The confusion happens when you just want to go and do something without clarity on what you want to achieve, right? So that would be my take.
Maybe getting back to your Tiger Team example and governance, there's lots of thinking around how to design the governance, orchestrate everything. A lot of the mistakes happen in the staffing of those initiatives, because in the end, the person which is in charge of, you were talking a factory, bringing manufacturing function to the next level of AI in an industrial group, for instance. The person who is in charge of that needs to be one of the top leaders, putting all their energy, their weight, their influence, their experience into the thing. And very often we see companies who are staffing with 2 junior people because no one wants to take the risk. I'm a super senior member of a Nextcom of a big company. Do I want to risk my career on saying I'm going to bring AI to the next level in all our manufacturing function? It's not obvious, but that's what needs to happen. You need some of the most senior people of the company dedicating their time to push these things and in a way putting their career at risk on this one. But if you say, okay, my job is to migrate data. No one has lost a career for migrating data. Of course, you migrate, you can write a big check or whatever, and things will go good. If you say, I'm going to build an AI center for excellence, you'll succeed. You will be able to recruit people, although it is difficult, and you'll have a center in the end. If you say, our manufacturing will have a 2-3x jump in whatever metrics you want to have across the world, everywhere, thanks to AI, for sure you can fail. For sure. And that's the type of challenge you need your best people to take for your companies, because in the end, on those projects, it's always harder than anticipated, but the price is much bigger than anticipated. And you need your best people to put all their energy after that.
So, Mr. Chidam, you are selling AI solutions to Fortune 500 companies. You are implementing AI projects. But the thing is, as a company yourself, you also have to implement AI within the company. And that would mean basically reskilling lots and lots of people. How are you going about it?
So skilling, is something that if you look at 10 years ago, none of the digital technologies we talked about was there, right? AR, VR, and many times we talk about AI in isolation. It's AI in conjunction with other digital technologies, whether it's AR, VR, computer vision, for example, right, to deliver on a solution. So training, we have 160,000 people, right? And so training is important. And what we have now done is we have created an online university. It is training anytime, anywhere. Gaming has been introduced into training. And, we are also embedded within our customer sites, right? So we've identified core team members who can be trained on AI. Right? It's a 1-year training program that's been put in place, and they understand the domain as well, right? And then we have what's called the Makers Lab, which is working on the cutting edge of everything that's happening. So connecting all of these 3 together is the approach that we have taken, and it's paid very good results.
So Umesh, which are the areas you think AI will impact majorly first, as it starts getting into the core of every function of the business?
Well, so I think we've gone from predictive AI to generative AI to now agentic AI. The impact we are seeing, as we have all said, is across industry. We are beginning to see areas where workflows are heavily people dependent. For example, FP&A, if 3 different people have to check into the process to make an approval or disapproval, that's a great example where agentic AI is coming in. I give this example of an airline. To change a revenue policy, they had 3 different people assigned at 3 stages who had to give an approval. So this process used to take them 6 weeks. So if an airline is changing their revenue policy, season is changing, 6 weeks of workflow. They have now trained 3 agentic AI systems who are trained to do the job of those 3 human beings who are supposed to assess the data and say yes or no. Now an agentic AI system is doing that. So 6 weeks has shrunk to 2 minutes. All right. We heard David Solomon from Goldman Sachs give this example that it used to take a team of 6 individuals 6 weeks to file an S1 form, which is the form needed for filing of an IPO in the US. That's down to again 3 hours because of agentic AI. So we are going to see such low-hanging fruit. We're going to hear lots of stories. But if you don't mind coming back to the topic of governance, I think governance, guardrails, and sustainability is going to be really important around the world, but more pronounced here in Europe. You're all sitting in Europe. This market has a bigger emphasis on those type of areas. And Uniphore being an AI company, we think of governance and guardrails at a system level. All right. So yes, there are going to be teams of people, and the best people will be responsible for governance. But I think AI itself needs to be trained to drive better guardrails, because AI is going to be making decisions without human intervention. So how does that work? Newer toolkits have appeared in the last 12 months. Things like evidence management, fact check, where you're training these agentic AI systems to say, before you make a decision, run an evidence check. Don't just trust one source. Check with 3 or 4 different sources, either within the enterprise or in public data, to see, are you convinced that the answer that you're getting is the right one? Sure. Fact check against a database or public databases before you make a decision. And by the way, let's put guardrails that we as a company, if we are as an enterprise adopting Gen AI or agentic AI, we do not want certain types of answers to be given out by our chatbot. So at a system level, these toolkits are being introduced in the places where these agentic systems are being designed and trained, such that when they run in what's called inferencing, not just training, when they get into inferencing, they have those guardrails embedded in them, and therefore they're running more safer and more trustworthy.
So one of the things is the Indian IT industry, if you see the growth, they've supplied people to a lot of global Fortune 500 companies and run their tech departments. AI will bring a completely new spin to it. Do you think the the classic Indian outsourcing model is under threat? We'll start from you, Mr. Chidambaram.
See, it's not under threat, but it's changing. Right? At one point in time, we were all comfortable doing time and material kind of work.
Yes.
Right? Then we moved into managed services. Yes. Then we moved into fixed price and outcome-based kind of models. Right? Now, I think the future for all of us is, how do you create IP? Right? How can you take an entire process, let's say automate end to end, and then get to the top of the thought leadership chain, right? So from a Tech Mahindra perspective, we believe that 30% of revenue should come from assets that we create, where we are solving customer problems, right? And we're also working closely with Mahindra Group, our parent, right? And they do cutting edge work. They're the largest tractor manufacturers in the world, right? And so what we are doing is working with them to see if we can make their factories world class, right? And develop solutions there and do it at the right price point and then reverse innovate it into the developed world. Whether it's with agentic AI with Mahindra Finance, right? So we're working with each of our Mahindra Group companies to develop solutions, which are at the cutting edge and then bringing it back into the developed world. But I think the core is that the customer should see us as thought leaders, not as reliable service providers, but thought leaders who understand their domain, understand the challenges they face, can hold them by the hand and help them win in the marketplace.
Sylvain, how do companies deal with the ethical and the inclusive nature of AI? I mean, it's a problem, it's a concern for many people, and not many have clear answers on this topic.
So it's a concern for many people. And if we step back, it's the first time that there is so much concern around one technology. When you deploy nanotechnology or other things, no one is wondering whether nanomaterials, for instance, will nanomaterials increase diversity or reduce it, income equality or reduce it? No one is discussing this. So here we are in a very peculiar situation where this technology is so powerful that all of a sudden everyone wants to make sure it's used for the greater good, and that's creating new challenges everywhere on how to manage these things. So of course there's regulation, which plays a big role, and the EU is now going to start enforcing the EU AI Act pretty soon, which is putting lots of pressure on companies, and 70% of companies consider they are not completely ready to really deal with all the regulation challenge that is there. I think companies should not just wait for regulation, they need to be ahead, because regulation, it takes time, it cannot be super specific to a sector. So there's a very big muscle to build for companies to feel safe about what you are doing. Mm-hmm. And that requires not just a big declaration that you want AI for good, everyone wants AI for good, but it's also about tools. You were talking about that a bit earlier. It's about team, it's about red teaming, it's about resources in the end. And companies tend to underinvest in this function. Mm-hmm. And we saw that in the development of the financial markets in the past. It took some time and a few big accidents before there was a risk function that was properly working. Mm-hmm. We are at the same stage with AI and Gen AI. It requires a lot of work. You were talking about chatbots. How do you test a chatbot? Super hard. Companies need to build a protocol. We have built our own protocols on when we consider a chatbot is tested enough. Everyone is talking about red teaming, but how long, how often, what are the basis of your red teaming, how do you do that? Companies need to really double down on those issues because they will matter a lot. And we know trust is so critical for companies those days. It's instantly, you can lose a lot of trust with these things. So I would really encourage everyone to double down and invest on that.
So last question of the panel to you, Umesh. If you see, Sylvain has also spoken about how quickly AI is becoming sophisticated and how disproportionate impact it has on various things. You spoke about how the times have shrunk in work processes. Boards have to take the decisions, and right now they are only stuck in the proof of concept stage. How trained are or how ready are the boards to take large scale investment decisions that AI needs?
You've saved the best for last, Vinod. From where we sit, our sense is that most boards are pushing the management teams more than the management teams are ready to implement AI. So our observation is board of directors across the world, and there's a reason for that. It's not hard to understand. These boards have a fiduciary duty to investors. They are beginning to recognize, they're hearing from investors in Wall Street or the Indian stock market or a European stock market, where investors are saying that we are willing to pay a premium for your stock price if you prove to us that you effectively used AI and either increased revenue or efficiency, etc. So any company that's coming out with evidence is being rewarded, and the boards know that. So the boards are pushing the CEOs and CIOs of all their portfolio companies to drive more adoption of AI effectively. I think it comes down to what I started by saying. The difference between a company that's going to be at the forefront of this adoption, and we're going to be talking about those case studies 12 months from now in next year's Davos, versus the companies that will get left behind. What's going to be the difference? The difference will not be which LLM they used or which service provider they used. I think enough and more toolkit and help is available. The difference is effective leadership right now. And there are enough companies in our customer base which are doing inspirational work. They're adopting the best technologies. They're making the right changes in their company, and ROI stories are emerging. And yet there are others, like Sylvain had said, and everyone has commented on this panel. Yet there are others which are stuck in, let's just invest a little bit. Let's use somebody else's API. Let's create a nice demo and show our board that we are doing something. Those companies will be left behind.
Sure. On this note, we will end this panel discussion. Thank you for sharing your insightful views with us. I mean, it's a great learning to get perspective from 3 different players. I believe AI is going to be one hell of a ride for the government, businesses, and society. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.